And here we are, here now. Steve and I are here for you to tell you what we think has happened this week. Because, you'll get a lot of journalistic reports, of the empirical facts and all that, that the commercial media will not tell you about. Okay, fine, nice job. Clap, clap. But it's time now to analyze what's happening, where it's going on, and what's going to be happening. And we can know what's going to be happening because we can analyze the dynamics of the political forces that are operating. Now, Steve has some information about you that is not making the regular media. So let's hear from Steve here.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you. Want to talk about the number of people who have been disappeared or who have left on their own or who are in prison right now because of their immigration status. And this isn't a story anymore in the United States. It's really not talked about anymore, which is really a shame. But I want to talk about a little bit because you know, a lot of cities, if they had migrant people on the street, if they are selling food, doing casual work at Home Depot or other self-improvement stores, if they were present in the schools, you know, this kind of thing. There's been a drastic drop in the numbers. It's really been Um, it's really been alarming to me, but people aren't talking about it, and it's become normalized. Um, and once it becomes normalized, that's a problem. Whenever you have social oppression become normalized, you're you're in bad shape. So the research I did last week was kind of interesting, actually. The estimates on st students leaving schools is quite interesting. Um, I'm trying to share something with you right now, so give me 1 second, everybody. Okay, right here, we got it. Boom, it's shared. Here we go. Here's an article in the LA Times about week and a half ago. School enrollment drops amid ICE raids. We just don't know what happened to them. What kind of statement is that, Abraham?
Hmm.
We just don't know what happened to them. The students are gone. Yeah. Trump administration immigration crack are driving unexpected numbers, are driving unexpected enrollment declines in U.S. schools. Only this paper talks about it, LA Times. Great reporters. Harold Bloom, great reporter. Great reporter. Kate Payne, LA Unified lost 7,000 students last year. That's a lot of students to lose. Yes, it is the second largest in the country.
Yeah.
Newcomer student enrollment has seen steep drops. Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. The report I saw from research I do said that the United States, I don't know where they get these numbers. They estimate that 1.9 million people have self-deported. Again, I don't know where they got the number. Okay.
Hmm.
So 2 million people have left on their own.
Hmm.
So there was 66,000 imprisoned across the country, around the world. And I think there were 35,000 who were being held, who were, um, yeah, there's other numbers, but that number alone, if 2 million had left on their own, and 66,000 are being held in jails and prisons, that's a lot of that's a lot of people. And
66,000 in this past year
yes,
or
within this year, right? Since because the crackdown, now the crackdown, Trump's crackdown began in January.
uh,
Now people will say, well, Obama had crackdowns and Biden had crackdowns. That's true. But Trump made the issue of it, linking them to crime, to being people that are unwanted or are garbage. Remember, he used the word garbage for Ilhan Omar, and the Somalis call him garbage. So I just want people to kind of think about this. People are no longer on the streets. I'm telling you, I've been in some cities where you don't see people selling food anymore on the street. You see, it's diminished significantly. I do mean significantly. People who would sell flowers or work odd jobs, sell food at events, significant decline, not a little decline. This is the impact when you have um, organizations like, ICE and Border Patrol, who are fundamentally focused on grabbing people and locking them up. And it's just a shame. That's it. That's what I want to talk about that.
hmm. I wanted to bring up a whole different matter now, that's been revealed by the attack on the Jewish Hanukkah celebrators in Sydney, Australia,
Yes.
where Ahmad El Ahmad, a Muslim former policeman, actually captured one of the shooters, disarmed him, didn't even shoot him, even though he was shot twice himself. He just, stopped him from, disarmed him and arrested him. That's all, like something that the American cops don't know how to do. And wouldn't have done in the first place. There were two cops, Australian cops, at the beach at the time who were supposed to be the security, and all they probably did was run away and called for backup and ran away. Yeah, well, this guy, he did it. Okay, he stopped the massacre. Now, this is an indication that there's two different mentalities operating here. One, the two shooters, a father and son, who picked up ideas of ISIS on the internet and became militants, on their own, decided they were going to do this action. And then, this contradicts, the cliche that is announced by many sort of people who call themselves anti-Zionists, saying, "Oh well, ISIS is just, a militia financed and supported by the Zionist states, and that's why they never attack Israel." Well, maybe they couldn't, like that's not a definitive proof of anything. So here we have some ISIS inspired individuals who are attacking a Jewish cultural event of Jewish people who may very well be pro-Zionist, because Chabad, which sponsored the event, Chabad is an international Jewish missionary movement for Jewish people to bring back assimilated Jewish people into being something of a Jewish person again. according to Chabad, which means becoming somewhat religious and supporting Israel, even though there's a lot of people in Chabad, who don't support Israel. Okay, so on the one hand, you have the Jewish people there who are going to an organizational event which is pro-Zionist, but it was not a pro-Israel event in and of itself. There were no Israeli flags there. It was an occasion for Hanukkah, a celebration of the rebuilding of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem, and doesn't have any sort of uh, violent associations with it like Purim does. So, these Jewish people are in Australia. They're not in Palestine. Number one. Two, they may be Zionists, but they don't know. They don't even know what Zionism is in the first place. They think it just means being Jewish or pro-Jewish. So they've been indoctrinated. So they need to be spoken to by other Jewish people who are not Zionists, who could have gone there and educated them. Totally open space, you know. But is there a Jewish movement that's doing that? Well, in Melbourne, there's a Jewish Bundist movement, but all they do is, speak Yiddish. I've tried to, speak to them, communicate with them, to inspire them to take a position against the genocide in Gaza, and there's no response from that Jewish Bund. That's the Jewish Labor Bund, social democratic uh, Jewish organization that calls itself socialist, yes, but has never done anything, to oppose Zionism. The Jewish Socialist Bund, which is us, is the one that is carrying the revolutionary tradition of the Jewish Bund from Warsaw, Poland, that fought against fascism and opposed Zionism from the very beginning. And that means, 1947, 1948, when the Jewish Bundist refugees refused to go to Palestine, even if, they were refused a visa to any other country. Who knows what happened to them? But the Bundists, were even beaten by the Zionists in the Jewish refugee camps after the Holocaust because they were telling people not to go to Palestine because that would mean going to war against the Arabs, against the Palestinians, and they opposed going to war against the Palestinians. On the other hand, we have Ahmed al-Ahmad, Muslim man, who is most likely anti-Zionist, but he was against the massacre of the Jewish people on the beach there in Sydney, Australia. Now, what were the Jewish Hanukkah celebrators on the beach in Sydney, Australia about? They're not in Palestine. By definition, Zionism means that all Jewish people should go to Palestine, colonize it on behalf of a Zionist state, which calls itself a Jewish state. They didn't do that. So, according to Zionism, they're not Zionists because they haven't fulfilled, what the Zionist ideology requires of Jewish people. So, they may not be consciously anti-Zionist, but they are not Zionist, which is termed by non-Zionist. Non-Zionist is not Zionist, it's not anti-Zionist, but it's not Zionist. So to attack them in retaliation for the genocide in Gaza, by attacking them for being supporters of a genocide in Gaza, is false. One doesn't necessarily consider them to be supporting of the genocide in Gaza, even if they might be supporting the Zionist state itself. Two, they weren't there in Gaza. They were not the soldiers, killing Palestinians in Gaza. They were not the pilots dropping bombs on Gaza. They were on a beach in Sydney, Australia, celebrating Hanukkah. That's all. And yet they were attacked because the ISIS mentality, it would seem, as well as uh, the mentality of many Marxist thinkers in the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, believe that what they are dealing with in terms of Zionism is Jewish supremacy. And they use the term Jewish supremacy that they borrowed from B'Tselem, an Israeli civil rights organization. Of course, an Israeli civil rights organization is talking to other Israelis. And when they're talking about Jewish supremacy, they mean Zionist supremacy, and everybody knows that. But outside of Palestine, if you use the term Jewish supremacy, you're not talking about Zionist supremacy. You're talking about Jewish people. And you're not even talking about Zionism, like you're talking about, like Jewish supremacy as if, this was the Jewish people taking over the whole world, as if, Jewish people control the United States of America, as if Jewish people controlled France, as is often alleged, saying that, the Jewish Zionist organization there, CRIF, CRIF, controls the French government, which is contradicted by the fact that the president just came out in favor of recognition of Palestine, which he was obliged to do for international credibility. Not that they're doing anything about it, but obviously, like the Zionist organization in France, CRIF, would not be in favor of the recognition of Palestine. So they couldn't possibly be supporting the government of France to that extent. They may have certain influence, yes, but the reason why France and the United States are pro-Zionist is because they are Christian. And Zionism is just Judeo-Christianity, as Netanyahu himself announced when he spoke to the Christians United for Israel conference in the United States of America with Haggai. So it's not Jewish, it's Judeo-Christian. It is a colonialist ideology that has been imposed upon the Jewish people and imposed a a supposed solution for the Jewish people by directing them, to Palestine. When the Jewish refugees, were in the refugee camps, like my parents were in Breslau, in Germany, after the Holocaust, after the Second World War, they, wanted to leave Europe because Europe, wasn't hospitable. Europe was crazy. So they were not given a piece of land themselves, to establish a Jewish autonomous territory. No, nobody thought about doing that. So, they couldn't get a visa to go to, a lot of Jewish refugees couldn't go to, Canada, United States, because they didn't have relatives there that would sponsor them as citizens. And as Jewish refugees, they were just refused outright, because these countries, these Christian nation states, colonial settler Christian states, did not want to have Jewish refugees, even if they were survivors of the Holocaust. Just refused them. So they were directed to go to Palestine. That was the only place in the world where they were allowed to go to. They went, and then their children were turned into Zionists, and they continued on to become fascists, killing off as many Palestinians as they could. So along comes Ahmad el-Ahmad, who says, oh, like Zionism, is not my game, but these are people in Sydney, Australia, who are being, massacred for no good reason. And so he was going to save them, and he did. So you don't have to be a Zionist to support, those individuals. You just have to, be a humanist, an anti-Zionist who supports, the Palestinian liberation movement because it is seeking to liberate itself, not because it is seeking to kill Jewish people. But a lot of leftists, including Professor David Miller on the Russia Today show, calling for an attack on Jewish people. This is what I heard him say. Perhaps he would care to deny, what he had said previously, but he was talking about, attacking, Zionists, which he means the Jewish people, in a global intifada. This is how he defines a global intifada, as an anti-Jewish sentiment. And he expresses that in various ways, saying that the Jewish people have infiltrated and taken over the British state, which is a joke, really. This is like, some of the people you're thinking, that Rothschild family controls the international finance, even though they're a minor bank in London.
All that
So
nonsense.
there's obviously two different sort of mentalities here. One, and they're both, claim to be anti-Zionist, but one is anti-Zionist and anti-Jewish, another is anti-Zionist, and for the liberation of the Jewish people from Zionism. completely different. We of the Jewish Socialist Bund call for the liberation of the Jewish people from Zionism. And we have been successful in achieving this to a great extent. Now, 61% of Jewish Americans are opposed to the genocide in Gaza. Hmm. Amongst the younger people, it's even higher, like 75%. Hmm. And the Jewish Voice for Peace is putting out, historical information now, like about Marek Edelman, and featuring the fact that he was a leader of the Jewish Labor Bund in Poland and opposed Zionism, and wasn't even invited, by Israel, to Holocaust remembrance, ceremonies, even though he was a leader of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising against the Nazi extermination campaign. So that shows you the difference, between Zionism and Bundism, the difference between a movement that is simply anti-Zionist and a movement that is anti-Zionist and in solidarity with the liberation of the Jewish people, because Jewish people are an oppressed nation. This is not like France and Algeria. This is a completely different scenario in which the Jewish people who have been manipulated and massacred, repeatedly in history by the Christian nation states during the Crusades as well, is being shoveled off into Palestine to be gotten rid of and to serve as mercenaries, for the Western colonial project in the Middle East, so-called Western Orient. So the difference between these two mentalities is evident. And in fact, there was an appreciation for Ahmed al-Ahmad by many people who donated, to a fund, like a GoFundMe fund, So he collected $2.7 million there in appreciation for risking his life to save Jewish people. And this is probably, donations from Jewish people who may even be pro-Zionist, but they are pro-Jewish, first of all. And a lot of, pro-Zionist, Jewish people think that they are pro-Zionist because they are pro-Jewish. Now, if they knew the difference between pro-Zionist and pro-Jewish, they wouldn't be Zionist anymore. But who is telling them this? The students, are being told this, by Jewish Voice for Peace on campuses. But the regular Jewish community, they don't have access to such information. And me, when I went down to the Jewish community campus here in Montreal with a vigil, they did everything to try to stop me, put me in prison for 5 days because they didn't want me to tell other Jewish people that they didn't have to be Zionists, to be pro-Jewish. So now we have the development of two different movements. And when I was put in prison for 5 days, did the Palestinian Solidarity Movement, say anything in support? Did they anything to come and help me to get out of the prison? No, nothing. So it was quite evident to me, that there is not the same movement happening here. So the thing to do now is to become conscious of what is lacking in the Palestinian Solidarity Movement in order to make it effective in terms of undermining the last remaining pillar of support for the Zionist state, which is amongst the Jewish people. And a lot of people, Jewish people, still supporting the Zionist state, even though 61% were opposed to the genocide in Gaza. But they have to exercise their consciousness and have an effect upon the rest of the Jewish community and take over the Jewish community away from the Zionist financial control that it is subordinated to. Here in Canada, in fact, I'm suing the Combined Jewish Appeal, which collects the money, from donations for Jewish agencies, and the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, not Israeli, but Israel and Jewish Affairs, Israel First, the Zionist organization that replaced the Canadian Jewish Congress, which was a democratic organization for all Jewish people, whether Zionist or not. Now they set up an organization that took control over everything, the Jewish Public Library, the Holocaust Museum, everything they've taken over because they have control over the funds. And they've imposed a dictatorship, an ideological dictatorship. And to liberate the Jewish people from this dictatorship is the goal of the Jewish Socialist Bund. But is the left coming to support such a campaign? No. No. Why? Because it's pro-Jewish. What's wrong with being pro-Jewish? Well, according to them, according to Orthodox Marxism, being pro-Jewish is being pro-capitalist. According to Marx, in his pamphlet in 1847, his first pamphlet that he produced, that he never disowned, called On the Jewish Question, as if it was a question. Rather pathetic. This is where the most effective elements of Marxism are revealed in terms of, the analysis of national identity, which is, discounted as being a false consciousness, whereas class consciousness is the only material consciousness available, even though the working class speaks different languages throughout the world. But that's ignored. The working class is considered, to be one class internationally without any other differentiation to be made, which is impossible, by the simple empirical fact that the workers don't speak the same language and couldn't speak to each other even. So the working class international movement, the international, has to be sort of contextualized, and people, have to be sort of placed within their own consciousness. So, like that's, the lesson to be learned, from the failure to deal with Zionism. And in fact, the communist parties, were pro-Zionist until 1967. In fact, the vote of the USSR, helped to achieve the recognition of the state of Israel in 1948, because the USSR voted in favor of the recognition of Israel as opposed to Palestine. It didn't recognize Palestine at the time, no, even though the partition resolution called for the establishment of both a Jewish and a Palestinian sector in Palestine. Only in 48 was the state of Israel recognized, not the state of Palestine. And to a great extent, that was because of the USSR and of its allies in the ex-colonies. So, the left was 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 marked by this failure since the very beginning. And the only opposition to the Zionist movement was from the Jewish Bund and from the Trotskyist Fourth International. That was anti-Zionist, while the Communist International was pro-Zionist. That was the biggest demarcation between the two. So, there are two movements happening here, and it's not recognized, but I'm here announcing the fact that there is a movement which is pro-Jewish and anti-Zionist, whereas a great part of the left doesn't understand how to be pro-Jewish while being anti-Zionist. They think that anti-Zionist means being against the Jewish mentality, because so many of the Jewish people have been convinced to be pro-Zionist, even though they're not really Zionists because they're now living in Palestine. So it's a big mess. And here I'm addressing this failure of the left to cope with Zionism and to cope with Jewish identity, and calling out the left to reconsider its position and to adopt a Jewish Buddhist perspective, which is anti-Zionist, but in favor of the national cultural autonomy of the Jewish people in their countries of residence as well, which means self-defense against anti-Semitism, for example. Okay, that's what I have to say.
Great. Well, thank you. That's very important. Very important statement. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Very, very important statement. So where do we go from here?
What's happening with the Americans? Are they changing? I mean, they don't want a war with Venezuela. Okay. So Trump is losing the political game there, but he's still continuing, even though he's losing support, over Venezuela.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care
And
about
what's weird?
but
What's weird about,
Abraham, he doesn't care about. He doesn't care. He loses support. Remember, there's a split in the Republic. There's a split in the Trump administration. This is Rubio's program. Remember, Rubio
uh,
is the Gusano heritage Cuban
uh,
from Miami, anti-Cuban, and he's leading the charge.
uh-huh.
Trump is Trump is the face. Trump knows nothing about Venezuela. Trump is a
Mm,
racist. Trump is a face, and just released his new so-called Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, and that's what's fueling it. He could care less about seekers. Let me tell you something. If he had a million people in the streets today, every weekend there's a anti-Kings, there's a no Kings rally coming up.
Mm.
I think in January or February. They may care about that. But Venezuela, this is the issue I mentioned, I think, last week. Maybe I didn't mention it correctly. As long as there are no Americans coming back in body bags or dying in the streets of in the mountains of Venezuela, no one on the ships, no ships being sunk by Venezuelan military self-defense attacks, then Americans, to me, on even though they may poll that they're opposed to Venezuela, are not going to do anything. This is my view. Also, okay, I'm gonna say something else. I don't know. I'm trying to say it correctly because I don't want to sound incorrect here. It is easier to support Palestine than it is to support Venezuela. It is. Americans know nothing about Venezuela. Not really. It's a long ways away. But Americans know something about Palestine because there's been a movement of Palestinians for freedom. So it's easier to latch on to that than a movement against a movement for sovereignty. Americans in general, I know I should really don't give a damn about sovereignty of other countries. They really don't.
Mm.
No, no, they really don't. I mean, whereas except for Israel, I mean, the U.S. allies. But sovereignty isn't top on the list of liberal ideology. Not really, because America is based on violating sovereignty. America is based on it. So this is my opinion. I can't give you any data to back it up. But Venezuela is having a problem generating support in America against the oil tanker seizures. There's been two oil tanker seizures so far. Has anybody in Congress said anything about it? I don't think so. If so, it's just a whisper. We saw how about AOC, these other caucuses. Venezuela is in trouble as far as American opposition because the American view is that well, our country must have to do something. I'm not talking about Venezuela in particular now. In general, when it comes to foreign policy, um, um, exploits abroad, there's always unless there's some brutalities being seen, My Lai massacre, Abu Ghraib, something like that.
Mhm.
That gets attention. Still,
So this is
but still, oil tanker over the, I mean, regime change. You know, it's football games tomorrow. I'm gonna worry about that. So
so
I'm
this
not saying, I'm just saying that's how I see what's happening in America. I see
uh,
protests by groups, and that's good. They're protesting, but the ship seizures continue, and they're going to continue. The protests will not stop it. Not because we shouldn't protest, but not because Trump doesn't care. Trump and the U.S. government are determined to overthrow that government. Just as
yeah,
that's kind of what they're going,
I
and
don't get it
that's what
though.
they're going to do.
I don't get it, because Venezuela is supplying 25 to 30% of its oil is going to the United States, by way of the Chevron company.
You know?
So it's already giving its oil, to the United States at a low price right
It's not
now.
about it's not see it's not
I
about
don't
the
get it.
oil.
Like why are they picking on Venezuela?
It's
It must be.
because it's not a U.S. client regime. They want Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. One, two, three. That's the list.
So it's
They
an
can't,
ideological war.
right. They can't overthrow Brazil. I mean, No, they can't overthrow Brazil. Brazil is not in their back pocket. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago, they dropped a sanction against a judge. The judge in the Bolsonaro case, the sanction was dropped. So they want to get rid of all the non-client non-U.S. client regimes, and they are big in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua.
Uh-huh.
They'll say drugs, they'll say oil, they'll say child abuse, they'll say persecution of Christians, they'll say whatever they want to say, okay? They'll say
Hmm.
anything. That is the goal. That's it.
Uh-huh.
And
So it's more important to them that Venezuela is sending oil to Cuba than the fact that Venezuela is selling oil to the United States already,
exactly,
the way of Chevron. Wow.
exactly.
Wow.
That's it.
That's an indication that they're fascist, and they're not just capitalist.
Right,
They're fascists here,
right.
because they're fighting a war. They want the United States to go into war for ideological reasons.
Yes, that's it.
That would,
That's it.
I
I mean,
mean,
now I want everybody who,
like, what's Mandela doing? Like, why doesn't he cut off the oil that is being sold to the United States now? If the United States is threatening Venezuela, how come he doesn't stop supplying the United States with the oil that
well,
is used to, like, fuel the military machine that is offshore, from Venezuela? Like, I don't
well,
get it.
well, I don't know that he hasn't done that, but you would think that if he had, we would know about it.
Yeah.
It could be a split in the Maduro government. Because remember, there are people in Venezuela who are opposed to the government. It could be a
Mm,
split. Well,
mm,
let's maybe we shouldn't do that. We getting some money from this, aren't we? We better keep the money coming because every oil tanker that they seize, the U.S. imprisonment seized, that's money
mm,
that Venezuela. I was listening to this guy this morning, from the University of Denver on a program called Useful Idiots that your good friend Aaron Mate is the host of and
mm,
the co-host. He was telling the person this anti-Maduro activist from who works in Denver as a professor was saying that the oil tanker money is used to buy food. And he also was saying something very interesting. He was saying that very few countries in the world have a military blockade of tankers. So this is quite unusual. I mean, we finally are getting something that we can maybe grab a hold on in our activism. Nowhere else in the world, or a very good few other places in the world, in the history of the world, have there been these blockades of the ports of a country and
mm,
seizure of boats leaving the country. They're not military boats. They're not, it had nothing to do with military. We're just going to seize it because it comes from this country. He would say it's highly unprecedented. And this man is opposed to Maduro from the social democratic position. He's opposed to Maduro, but he's not for seizing the oil because he knows that the proceeds of the sale of the oil is used by Venezuela to bring in food. So what he's saying
wow.
is that this is going to cause famine if food cannot be purchased. And this is something that people are not talking about. We need to talk about this. So this whole military campaign to get rid of, and it is a military campaign to get to overthrow Maduro, but not by using bombs, by seizing its raw materials on the high seas.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I I see your point, but if that's the only way if they allow that money in, what's interesting is the United States doesn't sanction Chevron, so you can't buy the oil. That's what's interesting. That's what's interesting because the Chevron could be sanctioned for purchasing for its work. I mean, I'm not saying should be, but if that shows you that they really don't want to attack the profits of Chevron, they wouldn't dare do it because Chevron is in effect helping to keep the regime of the Maduro government afloat by having business with it.
Uh-huh.
That's
Huh.
all I'm saying. That's why
Mm.
and that's why I assume Maduro hasn't cut off the oil because he needs some money coming in.
Uh, but they must be like so disorganized, because Venezuela is a country that has three growing seasons. Like why can't they grow their own food? Like I don't get it. They're not prepared. They're
Well, more than likely,
eh,
Abraham, more than likely, before Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution, Venezuela was a client U.S. state, right? Right.
uh-huh.
So therefore, client U.S. states are going to organize their agriculture, their mining, their housing construction, their education, their food production, their tourism around U.S. imperialist interests. That's why they don't have to. That's why that's not happening. I mean,
Yeah.
if the Bolivarian Revolution can't continue, it's possible that they could do that. But the U.S. client states are crop. They have crop economies. We have, what do we sell? Grow bananas. We import the rest of our food. What do we harvest? Coffee. And we import the rest of our food. Where's the coffee go? To the United States, to Europe, with bananas, United States, Ecuador, that kind of thing. That's how these economies are organized. What you're saying is what you are advocating is what the graduates of the U.S. schools of agriculture and economics and finance don't tell the graduates from pre-Maduro, pre-Chavez Venezuela, from pre-Sandinista Nicaragua, from pre Castro Revolution Cuba. They teach them the colonial method, the colonial way of approach, World Bank loans, that kind of crap. Okay. That's why they don't do it, man. Because they're part of that US colonial, US imperialist network of extract raw materials, import food, become dependent on the West. Yeah, you're right. But that to me that's why. And the blockade and the sanctions would prevent would maybe deter would deflect people's organizing in that way because they have to do other things to survive. So that's how
Mhm.
imperialism works. It doesn't just, and I'm not saying it to you. I want our listeners and viewers to understand that's how modern imperialism works. Even through the school systems, universities, they promote a certain way. They promote a status of the countries within the periphery that are under hegemonic rule. That's why they don't do it, man.
Mhm.
Yeah, to me,
Well,
no, 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 no. It's very. I'm not going to say demoralizing and depressing, but it shows the power it shows the power right now that the large military industrial complex superpower like the U.S. has over over the Western Hemisphere.
mhm, mhm. Okay. Uh, on a continuing note, I should point out that my YouTube channel is still banned. I think the only way and I'm still being accused of being a violent criminal organization. I think that the it's going to change, though. It must change, after Russia has liberated all of the territories that were in revolt against the central Kyiv government since 2014 when they were invaded. And now that Russia has come in to help them withstand the occupation force and to liberate its territories, a Russian-speaking territory. There's only three bulges there that are left, to be liberated. And where they have reached the frontier of those provinces, with Ukraine, the Russian forces have stopped advancing. So they're not invading Ukraine proper.
Right, 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 right,
Now,
right,
so when they, finish liberating those three bulges, that are remaining in the territory of Donetsk, Lugansk, and the southern one, then the war will be over. So, YouTube won't be able to accuse me of supporting a violent criminal organization anymore, because there's no more, activity happening. So, I don't see how they'll be able to keep on, banning my YouTube channel after that becomes a fait accompli. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But continue to be banned, by YouTube.
Well, I tell you what I think. I'm gonna say it again. I think that people who are let me give you an example. I produce produce material that I put on YouTube and on other platforms, but I produce it myself. So I can put it on these platforms, but I also can put it I can be the producer and almost like an independent filmmaker. And I think we have to find ways of getting around the monopoly of internet distribution somehow because
Yeah.
if because at any time they can just chop our stuff off. So that's something we're having to face is that the internet as a forum doesn't belong to us, and
Yeah.
it's a very harsh reality to face.
Yeah.
But right now, unless you have your own internet people can access. That's not owned by excuse me, your own channels. So YouTube is not your channel.
Yeah.
We can get on the internet, but we have to find other forums within the internet outside of YouTube and to broadcast our material because that's
Well,
that's that's the issue we're
we have,
facing.
yeah, for email and for list servers, we have a Rise Up website.
True,
Okay, that's
true, true, very. But Rise Up is hard to get onto, isn't it? It's still you have to be referred by somebody.
you have to be sponsored by somebody else, yeah, who's
Right,
already a member there.
right, okay.
Then we also have Proton Mail. I think a lot of people go for
True. Yeah.
Proton.
Well, Proton Mail is we can do a lot. Right now they have docs and they have a VPN, and we could
Hmm.
and you can set up. I'm assuming well, listservs. I mean, yeah, you're right. Right. It's true. That's very true. Very true. Very true. We have
Okay,
to.
but so that's good for email. Email and email lists, are set up and are independent on the internet
Right.
now.
Right.
But we
True.
don't have an independent platform for videos.
That's it. That's what's needed.
Yeah.
That's a critical um, vacancy or something that's we need to fill. Once that's filled,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know if Yandex does Yandex have that video? I don't know.
Well, so far, like what's adequate is Substack for
True, 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 true.
essays but for uploading a video, you can't upload a video directly to Substack. Can only put in a link, to a video. So I use TikTok to upload the video, but that's not stable, because TikTok has been bought to some extent, by a Zionist agency. But so far, they don't seem to have controlling interest in that. I haven't had any harassment there on TikTok. And then Facebook, seems rather stable. I have now 6.4 thousand subscribers on my Facebook account. I've been given, more of a professional operator status, so I can go beyond the 5,000 maximum for regular subscribers to Facebook. And I haven't had any censorship from Facebook for like last 4 years or so, so
Okay, okay.
like those, leftists, say that one shouldn't be on Facebook. I wonder why.
Well, I
Like
never
why are
said
they
that.
saying that? Because
No, I
Zuckerberg
never said that.
Zuckerberg owns Facebook,
Okay.
and the reason not to be a subscriber to Facebook is because Zuckerberg is the name. is,
Well,
like
no.
is Jewish, like is that the reason? Like I
Well,
don't get it.
I still think even in this, it's a victory that you are still allowed, that you're still able and capable of platforming on Facebook. But I
Mm,
do think that the creation of an alternate video streaming
yeah.
or video streaming platform is necessary, and
Yeah.
maybe AI
Video
can do
streaming
it.
and chat
Yeah,
program.
right. Yeah, we need because at this point they can eliminate the access. So if whoever out there is watching this program who's listening, if you are developing um, AI video streaming messaging platforms, please let us know because we need
Yeah.
that is what's lacking
Yeah.
so that you or me or anybody can just be cut off at the drop of a hat. If we if we can get access to the internet with such platforms, then if
Then we don't have to
any
send self-censorship, like all these others, like the gray zone, they are into self-censorship, because they're afraid of being blocked on YouTube. It's really a problem. It's a real problem there.
well,
Yeah.
and also, but not only that, right, it impacts what they can and will say.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There is an independent chat program. I don't know if it's, if it's really independent, but it's working and it's encrypted. Called Wire, WIRE. That's the best chat program
yeah,
that is
yeah,
available.
yeah.
WhatsApp, is encrypted, but
But
it's part of Meta Facebook,
yeah, and
and its metadata has been used by Israel to locate Palestinian leaders' targets and assassinate them. It used the metadata, from WhatsApp in
well,
order to locate.
I think you're pointing out something there. Again, it's an extension of what I just said. We need we need we need con concentrated and concerted efforts in this area. Because
Yeah.
our movement essentially is not a military movement. So we don't have an arms factory. We're not creating mines and mortars and RPG. We're not. That's not what we're doing. That's not what's happening with us. Okay, we're
No.
trying to get our ideas out here, have conversations, build movements, build platforms, and we need this kind of development along the area of portals we can control outside of Meta and of WhatsApp and other portals, so our communication can be can thrive without fear. The only fear we would have is that the WWW cuts us off. That's one of the fear that we should have.
Yeah.
We develop a network. We need to
Yeah.
develop
I mean,
platforms.
WW network is still controlled by the United States. It was
So
originally a military controlled
So
affair. Yeah.
that's always going to be a danger.
Yeah.
But as long as
But
we acknowledge that
the
danger,
internet is bigger than www.
right?
If need be, we can go into the dark web.
That's no, that's possible too. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, let's have that that's the conversation we need to have and be working on, so we can have platforms to have this conversation. To
Yeah.
me, the dark however we have to do it. Those
Yeah.
are our those are the labs we need to develop right now because
Yeah.
we need to develop it and have our elders and middle age and youth collaborate their knowledge on how to develop it, how to sustain it, and how to grow it, so so that more people know how to do it. How do we set up
Yeah.
how do we set this up? How do you set up a Facebook? How do you set it up? How,
Mm.
how do you set up a Google? I mean, a Google. How do you set it up? How do you set up a Yahoo? How do you set it up? The basis
Yeah.
what we have to have is our own Google our own Yahoo, our own Rise Up, our own networks that can do video and video, audio, and text, text, text distribution of data that are secured from DDoD attacks,
Hmm.
because that's what will happen.
Yeah.
And that to me explains why um what's that group the one out the new AI out of China. I can't remember the name right now, but it's really
Oh, yeah.
been
Deep seek.
DeepSeek. Yeah, DeepSeek. It was attacked viciously when it first came out, and to be fair, it's free. It's free still. It's
Hmm.
still free. So they've been able to, and they're also targeting African states. So they're targeting them, or they're aiming their platforms to be adopted by African states. So I'm saying they developed that. China developed that. So we have developed something similar.
Yeah.
Activists. That's
Yeah.
all. That's
Maybe
all I'm saying.
China should help out.
They should.
China,
They
yeah,
should, if they're about what they're about. But that's the question.
yeah. Well, TikTok is being sold off in pieces, in the United States, in order to make it conform to American laws.
And also
S-
content. And yeah,
But to the extent that it's going to affect the content is yet to be seen. But
we'll see. We'll see.
the whole reason why it's being sold off is in order to control the content.
Right. Right.
Especially the Zionists, are freaking out about TikTok.
Well, but
But
I want to come back to something you said earlier during your statement. I think you should create a unitary statement about what you said earlier. I think you need to broadcast solely on that. Like when I upload and send you today, somehow let's take that and make a statement out of it. I think it was a very important statement that you made. Yeah,
okay.
it was very important. Yeah.
Okay. A final point to be made here is the photo behind me here is from 2012 here in Montreal, when there was a student strike against tuition fee increases, and there was the general strike in 2012 actually failed, but it was reinitiated in 2015. The student strike went on for 7 months and won,
Woo.
and defeated the tuition fee increase. It brought down the minority liberal government, which failed to win the election that it called on a snap election, in order to build upon supposed sentiment against the students. And they lost. The new government, canceled the tuition fee increase and canceled the law under which we were being arrested,
There you
Law
go.
68.
There you go.
So this banner comes from 2012, from the beginning of that movement,
There you
which
go.
eventually became very successful and brought down the government and started off, with demonstrations like this one here. And that banner says for direct democracy, which means, democracy from the street, when the people go out, and and tell the government what needs to be done, rather than just waiting, for the next election to happen, when you can vote for somebody who's not even going to follow through on what they're saying, what they're promising in the first place.
Right.
So it's an interesting banner here that directs us, to popular mobilization as a means to affect policy and to build up a movement that will eventually replace the corporate media and the corporate parties that are in control of the countries here for the moment. So that's what's happening today. And here we are, here and now. Steve Struggle and myself, Dr. Abraham Weisfeld of the Jewish Socialist Bund. And we will speak to you again next week. Thanking you for your attention again and asking for you to help out by sharing and letting other people know that there's an alternative, to the corporate and the journalistic platforms that exist already. Here we have an analysis for movement building, and we continue to do so, and nothing is going to stop us.